Hello my internet peeps, how are you today? Welcome to my channel. This is Scott Rideshare. So today I kind of want to talk about horrible bosses. Okay, I in most of my videos I'm telling you that one of the ways to make extra part-time money as a rideshare is that you don't have a boss to report to. Okay, most of us have horrible bosses stories. The movie, but the first movie, I didn't see the second one, but the first one was hilarious. In either case, most of us have horrible bosses stories, and we can relate to that. And one of the reasons why I promote that we don't have a boss with this rideshare is because I think it's an advantage. I love the fact that I don't have anyone I need to report to. Now that's not to say every single one of my bosses was horrible. In fact, the last job I had before I started doing rideshare full time, I loved my boss. I would take a bullet for that guy. All right, he would back me up if something went down, and if I did something wrong, he would correct me, which is what a boss is supposed to do. They're supposed to, he would take the blame. A lot of times unnecessarily. I don't think he needed to accept blame for things, but he would take the blame on himself. He would praise me when I did something good. He would back me up if something went down, as long as I was doing the right thing. And if I did the wrong thing, he would correct me. That's, to me, what a great boss is. Not everyone does that. So I wanted to tell you a story about one of my horrible bosses. And this came up because I was giving somebody a ride. And sometimes when you're a driver in a car, you become like the bartender, and people start telling you some really personal things. Like, I don't want to get into all the different things because they don't always make great stories. But let me give you my experience about a horrible boss that I had. One of them. I consider her one of the worst bosses that I had. I was in security, and I was assigned to a residential building on the beach. Okay. Now, let me try to explain security to people who have never been in security. What's weird about it is you get hired by a company, and then your job is to go out and make the client happy. And most of the times, you spend all day, every day with the client and the client associates, and almost no time with your employees, with other employees with the company, co-workers, your boss. Your boss most of the times doesn't know you from Adam, or a hole in the wall, I should say. And what happens is many times when they hear something, all they hear is the bad. So unfortunately, that's kind of the way it is with security. And as security, you have to kind of walk a tightrope because your job is to you work for the company. You can't really forget that, but you also have to make the client happy. And then a client associate one day may be showing you pictures of their kids, and then the next day you're going to have to enforce a rule or regulation on them. That's kind of the way it works. And if you don't enforce that rule or regulation, you could lose your job. So, it's kind of strange, and it's hard for people to understand it unless they're in it. And in this particular situation, the property manager is considered a client. And she was a very difficult person to work for. My job, I was the site supervisor, so I had a couple of guys under me. And my job was to make sure the client was happy, okay? And let me give some background information. I'm going to talk about lights for a second. I know this may seem boring, but bear with me for a second. It plays in with the story. I'm not going to use technical terms or anything. I'm going to use my layman jargon over, okay? At my desk, I had a light that was overhead. It was on all day long. It was on all night long. And in that lobby, there were like 3 other lights that were on all day and all night. I call those daylights. There were certain lights that were on all the time, 24 hours a day. Then there was photosensitive cells around the building. So when the sun went down and it started getting dark, the lights would come on. When the sun came up and it started getting light, the lights would go off. Makes sense, right? So Now those lights that came on at night, I brilliantly called them night lights. And there's another set of lights, and let's say the building lost power, the generator would kick on, and certain lights would come on. Now these lights weren't there to illuminate things where you can like read a book. They were just enough for you to evacuate if you needed to evacuate the building. It was just there to provide just enough light to get you out of the building. I called these emergency lights. So, in other words, you had what I called three different types of lights. You had day lights, you had night lights, and you had emergency lights. Okay, that bears in on what we're going to say, the story I'm going to tell you in a second. Okay, now let me tell you a little bit about the job itself. We have what's known as daily logs, and we have to write down pretty much what goes on during the day. Now, the company I worked for required you made 2 entries every hour. If you're on the midnight shift, there was nothing going on. So it's very difficult to write something down when you're working from 11 at night till 7 in the morning because there's nothing happening most of the time. Sometimes, yeah, but most of the times, no. You're getting up, you're doing a patrol if your site required it. Otherwise, you're sitting there. What are you writing? There's nothing going on. A squirrel walked by. You know, you know what I'm saying? And it was expected of you to make it interesting. I don't know where that came from, but that's kind of how sometimes they came at you. But in either case, during the day, there's so much going on that you could write down as much as you can, and you're more than covered. It was usually just a problem at night. In fact, usually on a day shift, you end up missing things sometimes. I used to do what's known as backlogs. Oh, I forgot to write this down. Backlog. At this time, this happened. Anyway, we also had what was known as the security pass-on log, and it was essentially a book, sometimes a notebook, sometimes a big bound book with line pages on it, and we wrote information that went to the security, and it was only for us, for security. It wasn't really for anyone else. In one particular building, for example, it would be this resident is in now with guests, 3 guests. This resident is out of the building. And it was important for that particular site, not the site I'm talking about, but that particular site. We also had visitor logs at the site that I'm talking about, where when a car pulls up, it wasn't a resident, you kind of had to log it down. Now, if a resident was using somebody else's car, we kind of had to log it in. We kind of had to explain it because the property manager wanted to know who that car was. And sometimes the members of the board would say, whose car is that? So, you kind of had to log pretty much everything. Okay. Residents, by the way, are clients' associates. Their belief, a lot of residents' belief is that because they pay maintenance fees, and the maintenance fees pay our paychecks, that we work for them. Not true. You work for the security company, and you have to kind of walk a tightrope sometimes with that, with enforcing the rules that the condominium association has set forth. So anyway, getting back to it, we had in this particular site, what would happen was, actually any time, whether I was a site supervisor or whether I was a regular security officer, when I came in, I would go to the security log and I would look to the last time I worked, and I would read anything that was in there since then, and initial next to each entry to let anyone know that yes, I read it. And then I would grab whatever daily logs were written from the time before the last time I worked. So if my shift ended on a Friday at 3 p.m., I would grab on Monday morning, I would grab the logs from Friday starting at 3 and read through until, Monday morning to see what happened over the weekend. Now, this particular building, the property manager wanted to read what we officers were writing, which is fine. It's what the client requests. So what I would do is I would come in the morning as a site supervisor, I would read through what happened, and I would get everything ready, and I would put it on top of the lobby counter. And the secretary would come in, she would grab the paperwork, she'd bring it into the bag and put it on the property manager's desk. Then the property manager would come in and she would go down through the garage and go to her office. And depending on how busy it was, do what needs to get done. Monday mornings are always kind of hectic. And then eventually she would have some time to read through the daily logs. And then she would come out at some point and bring it to me. if there's an issue we needed to discuss, we would discuss it. Now, this doesn't include emergencies because obviously, if there's a flood, you got to take care of that right away, and all these procedures go out the window. But if it's like a normal thing, like lights or something, then you discuss it first chance you got. All right, so now that's all the explanation. Now let's go to the story, okay? To kind of explain how difficult this woman was. I remember coming in on a Monday morning, and I'm reading the logs from Friday, when the guy who relieved me is writing down that there's a problem with the lights. He spoke to the property manager. The electrician came out. She knew about it. The electrician even spoke to the property manager, and it was resolved. That was on a Friday night. So I'm like, okay, good. There's nothing for me to discuss. The issue was resolved, and I know that there wasn't issues in case it's brought up. So we did our normal thing. And then like 3 weeks later, approximately, I'm going by memory here, I don't have the logs to look at, but it was approximately 3 weeks later, I come in on a Monday morning, and the midnight guy says, oh, there's a problem with the lights. So I'm like, okay. So I start reading through the daily logs from when I left on Friday. And it was the same guy from 3 weeks ago on a Friday that relieved me. And it happened after the property manager left. What he logged was that the lights came on early. They should have been somewhere around 8, somewhere in the 8, 9 o'clock hour, somewhere around there. And they came on like around 7:30, 6 o'clock, 6:30, something like that. It was earlier, okay, than it was supposed to. Well, that guy also left at 11 and came back at 7 in the morning. And he wrote on his morning log that they turned off later. So they were supposed to turn off around 7:30 in the morning, and they turned off, it was like 8:30, 9 o'clock, something like that. And then I noticed that he must have mentioned it to the guy who worked 3 to 11 on Saturday, because that guy also noted what time the lights came on. He took a highlighter and he highlighted the log. Now, I knew I had to talk to that guy as soon as I read that you don't highlight logs. What you do is, if you really need to, write it down on a pass-on log, which is where it should have been logged to begin with among security officers. But if he wanted to, he could have grabbed a Post-it note and wrote on the log, but not to deface the log itself. So anyway, I knew I had to talk to him about it when I saw him Monday at 3 o'clock at the end of my shift. But I also noticed that on Sunday morning and Sunday evening, the lights were about 2 hours off at that point. So Monday morning, I give all the logs to the secretary to take in the back. Because of the highlight, that this guy worked like 2 days on the weekend, and he highlighted both entries, I didn't feel the need to write an additional Post-it note on top of it, because when you read it, you can see the highlight. It jumps out at you. And typically, what would happen is the property manager would, like if I wrote a Post-it note, she would typically not really say anything until later on in the day or the next day and say, oh, this contractor's coming out to work on this. Something along those lines. So what happened was I give those logs and I note what time the lights go off myself. Now, I'm expecting her at some point to discuss the electrician, let me know when the electrician's showing up. And if she doesn't, then I would let her know when the electrician showed up. So, it wasn't like an emergency or anything. And in this case, this particular case, this Monday was very busy. And she never really had a time to stop and talk to me. She was working, she was busy. And she comes out and she puts the logs down and goes out to talk to a contractor. That was how I got the logs back. It wasn't more than anything than, hi, how are you, how's the weekend, everything was fine, blah, blah, blah. And then boom, she went on. There was really no time to discuss things. Tuesday was the same thing. It was too busy for her and I to really have any kind of typical conversations. But at this point I'm thinking, well, normally she would have had the electrician out already on Monday. So maybe the electrician's coming out on Tuesday. And no, the electrician didn't come out on Tuesday. So now it's Wednesday, right? And it's about 11:30. And the lights should have gone off probably about 7:30 in the morning, 7:45. And the lights are still on. And it's a slow day. And she comes out and she puts the logs down and she's like looking around. Beautiful view, by the way. There was nice lawn outside. There was trees. It was beautiful. And, she's kind of admiring the view and looking around. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, how do I bring this up? Now, the reason I had a problem with it is because once I finish telling you the story, you'll understand that this lady was rather dismissive, and not a very good person. I've seen her talk to contractors, and when the contractors leave, she'd look at me and start laughing, like she had fun talking down to them the way she did. So no one really wants to be talked down to, and I was stuck with her all day, every day. So I didn't. The times of being talked down to, I wanted to lessen it as much as possible. So I'm thinking to myself, well, she had to have seen it if she read the daily logs, and she always reads the daily logs. So I wanted to broach the subject. I felt I had to, as my capacity as a security officer. So I said to her, oh, have you noticed that the lights are still on? And she looks up, and she sees all the lights are on in the lobby. Now, remember that there are day lights where there's only like 3 of them on. These were the night lights that were on. And she goes, these are the emergency lights. And I didn't want to get into it with her because, to me, if they were emergency lights, the building has a lot more issues than the photo center themselves. So I didn't want to get into it with her. So I said, okay. I said, what about the lights out in the parking lot and underneath the canopy? You know, when you walked out the front lobby doors, there was a canopy overhead. And those lights came on at night. And they went off during the day. And the parking lot lights came on at night, and they went off during the day. And she looks at them, and she goes, those are the daylights. Which, no, they're never on during the day. And she goes, oh wait, now I'm confused. And she turns around and she walks away. She goes back to her desk. Okay. Then she grabs the radio, and she calls the maintenance guy. And she goes, can you come to my office when you get a chance? And he goes, yes. And then I see him in the cameras. He goes to the garage. He goes to the elevator closest to her office. He goes up that elevator, and I'm assuming he went to her office. He comes out probably 5 minutes later, and he hands me the radio and the keys. And he goes, I'm going to Home Depot. He wasn't allowed to leave the property without the radio and keys. That's why he dropped it off on me. So I logged that he dropped it off. He went out, and when he came back, I handed him the radio and keys, and he went about the building. Then he comes to me later, and he hands me some stuff. He goes, do you mind tossing this out? I go, sure, no problem. What is this stuff? I'm tossing it out, and he goes, those are the light-sensitive cells. The property manager asked me to replace them. So that's an example of what I considered a horrible boss. She never came up and apologized. She clearly got something mixed up, but was yelling at me about it. And I'm sure you all have horrible boss stories like that. This one was a little rather long and drawn out because I felt I needed to explain some things about security. I also felt I needed to give you some background information. But it was like that working with her on a day-to-day basis. I mean, the stories kind of spread out over time, but she was doing that over and every day was something along those lines. And that's one of the reasons why I consider her one of the worst bosses I've ever worked for. And I don't have to deal with that anymore. I'm like so relieved I don't have anyone like that I have to bite my tongue about when they're saying stupid stuff like that. So anyway, I hope you like this story. Without giving information on who you are, in the comments below, tell me about a friend of yours who has a horrible boss. I would love to hear about it. Anyway, I hope you liked the video. Please like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification. Share and comment. Also, if you want to drive and not have to deal with bosses, you can make some extra part-time money. Check the links down below. There's referral bonuses involved. Please see some of my other videos about that. And if you're a passenger, I always recommend people have both apps and they price shop between the two. And if you have one but not the other, you can get some discounts if you download and use the link down below. Okay? So I hope you liked this video. I hope it made you laugh. At the time I was going through it, it wasn't very funny, but you could see how it would be funny, right? Anyway, that should be in Horrible Bosses 3, the movie. Her type of boss should be there. I hope you have a great day. This is Scott Rideshare.